Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity to gather here tonight. We pray that your presence fill this room and guide us as we go through our meeting and make decisions that have the ability to affect the lives of so many in our community.
All right, we are now ready for open forum and public comments. In reading an article from the Texas Scorecard, I'm appalled that our tax dollars paid for one or more of the librarians in our independent school district to attend the Texas Library Association, the TLA conference, that celebrated hazardous sexual behaviors and defended offering sexually explicit books to students. TLA instructed librarians on how to teach young children to be fluent in the language and ideas of social justice. CRT, which states that individuals should be promoted or punished because of their skin, the color of their skin. If it is your intent to teach children knowledge, critical thinking, wisdom, and subjects basic to their success in education, then break your ties with the TLA. The books the TLA want to keep on our children's school shelves are written by adults. Let that sink in.
You're not better than someone else because of where you live, or who you love, or where you go to church, or who your mom and dad voted for, because on the inside, we are the same. When I heard the superintendent say to librarians, if you aren't conservative, you better hide it, I was appalled, but I was not surprised because I've lived here for 45 years. I know how conservative this town is. I will not hide anymore. There are people in this county now so emboldened by the fact that some of us are all hiding it, that it's now okay to silently and secretly ban books that we disagree with. Banning books that you disagree with is a cowardly bullying maneuver. When you ban books because they further a different opinion than yours on race relations, human sexuality, or anything else, you're saying, I'm right, you're wrong, your opinion doesn't count, and that makes you a bully. So what happens when we ban books because we disagree with them, based on our ideas of race, religion, politics, or sexuality? We create the other. And what happens when we stop seeing the other as just as human as we are? Matthew Shepard, Pulse Nightclub, Charleston, Buffalo.
It's also quite apparent to us now that there's a cancer growing in the school district. And while some of you sit in your chairs, you've allowed that cancer to grow in the school district, and now you have an opportunity to eradicate it. If you read the book material, this is not about division, about people's thoughts. This is sexual pornographic books. What I encourage the school board to do is tomorrow morning direct the principals and the librarians to remove these books. If it wasn't for Monica Brown and my wife, we wouldn't even know the danger of these books in this school library because the first review was a fraud. And the librarian or whoever had the authority to put these books on the library, that needs to be investigated. And it needs to be determined whether that employee under the HR guidelines is still worthy of being a GISD employee.
Many homeschool parents do so for religious reasons. They don't want to have their kids in public schools for religious reasons, and I think that's a legitimate reason, but they would like to get their kids into sports. But you also work for the taxpayers, and a lot of them are homeschooling their kids. So why don't you let them play ball?
This is an issue where this has been a very continued lapse in judgment. Removing a book like This Book is Gay tells every queer student in Granbury ISD that despite what we say about promoting a safe learning environment where all students are valued, they really aren't. When has having a book in a library meant endorsing its content? A queer sex ed book is too explicit for high schoolers, but a book with an extremely violent gang rape in the classics section is untouchable. This is a conservative community, and despite talking about how the other side has tried to politicize this issue, Dr. Glenn and the school board have made this a political issue to coast to another term as superintendent and board members. When a student questioning their sexuality or gender identity, whether you agree with it or not, is looking for resources about it, you have removed a safe resource to cover yourselves and enhance your political viability. It makes me sick to think that I cannot trust those put in place to be leaders in my school district to be anything other than cowards. Instead of standing for what's right, you stand for political expedience. Sleep well like I know you will.
Dr. Glenn, you have an amazing line of education. You are prepared for this position. There is no doubt about it. And the fact that you co-authored a book for daily devotionals If you knew this book was in your library for these students, I don't see how you would know to keep it in there, because you will not be judged by us here. One day you will be judged, and I don't want this held against you.
Please, please allow the homeschool kids access to the GISD programs.
In 2014, a study of elementary and high school students found that children became more empathetic toward LGBTQ folks, immigrants, and refugees after reading Harry Potter. Harry Potter, a story of a child who's different from his peers. I remembered that even back in the 90s, when I was reading that book to my fourth grade students, there were people who thought that Harry Potter glorified witchcraft and should be banned. All I know is that I read Harry Potter to my kids and they loved it. Everyone loved Harry Potter. And as far as I know, none of them have become Satan worshipers. We develop fear and anxiety around the things we don't know or understand. Books can be a gateway for fostering acceptance, empathy, and appreciation for others. Books can provide representation to children who come from or identify with marginalized communities. This highlights why educators often talk about books in the classroom serving two purposes. One, some are mirrors, while others are windows. Exposing children to books that serve as windows and mirrors encourages them to seek out more of their own so they can keep reading and learning about themselves, others, history, and the world outside their home.
She then accuses the school board members of taking the book out of context. Okay? Can please someone educate me on what the proper context is for a children's protective worker and therapist, and take her out back, boys, put your hands on her titties, put it in a cornhole. Is that what GISD is doing? Targeting and personally going after each kid who identifies as LGBT? Well, of course not. But are we going after the hardcore LGBT agenda that is militantly grooming and going after all the children that can get its slimy tentacles wrapped around regardless of grade level? The answer is an unapologetic, you damn right we are. And in this case, the fueling the LGBT agenda is the rapid acceptance and normalization and celebration of pornography, because God knows that common sense and good science won't get that agenda very far. Folks, we need to return to reading, writing, and arithmetic. We need to be teaching the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s and not the LGBTs. And folks, do not be deceived for one moment. For those parents and teachers who dare question this tack, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Police will be present to enforce compliance by hijacking the strong arm of the law. The LGBT translation, you will see it our way, or we will hurt you. That's what we call tolerance. And those who shout tolerance are the most intolerant of all.
And if you love these kids, that means that there's not going to be any kid who feels persecuted. There's not going to be any kid who feels like that because they're different, they're a bad person or they don't count.
I come here tonight as a person who is a retired Texas educator of 35 years. These topics in these books distort human sexuality, they demean women, and they run the threat of hurting the mental health of the students that we're charged here with the responsibility of taking care of. And if you're having difficulty making some kind of decision as to whether this is the right thing to do or not, I would encourage you to resign your seat so that someone with greater discernment can be placed in that seat. The Texas Penal Code, Title IX, Chapter 43, makes it a criminal offense to distribute this kind of material to anybody under the age of 18, and that is a felony offense. I would suggest you take a quick look at what's going on as far as the poetry reading and the prose reading and the dramatic interpretation things that are being done at UIL events, because I've been a judge for the last 10 years at those activities prior to COVID, and some of the filthiest stuff that I've ever heard in my life is being read by high school students.
I moved to Granbury in 2020, and I really hope it stands up to the reputation it had when I came. It is a far bigger problem than you realize. And you also, Dr. Glenn, realize you have educators just like that one, just like this one. And I'm sorry to point fingers, but we have librarians who are misunderstanding what is healthy and good for children. We have teachers in this district who are reading it out loud and delighting in it. You have leaders in your system that were on the school board, the book review committee, principals, Teacher of the Year award winners who just like that put it back. And also, I know the new policy may have more librarians and independent school district employees on those committees, and I feel like that's already headed in the wrong direction to have too many of them. I think you ought to have people of good moral standards, people in the community that maybe even are voted on, pastors like Paul Duncan. He would never steer you wrong, and he'll put you in a safety zone with your books. You don't have to have these ultra controversial books in your library, and literally you have thousands of books. So what harm is it to let go of some of them?
I would like for us to consider discussing partnering with other local districts and the legislature to implement policies that would prevent sexually explicit books from getting into the hands of our children. I do recognize that we will be discussing stricter policies going forward handed down from the TEA, but it would be nice to have an extra layer of protection and to also support the other districts and 27 state House representatives that have signed on to this pledge. I believe the majority of our taxpayers and community would also appreciate us taking this proactive stance. Pledge states that we will not knowingly partner with, purchase from, or associate with in any way a vendor who has supplied pornographic materials to schools and not allow pornographic materials to remain on campus. And I believe that signing this pledge is a step in the right direction. In signing this pledge, we're taking a stand against such vendors, and hopefully, because of this stand, the vendors will have to adjust. The availability of pornography, I believe, has no place in our schools. When our children have access to sexually obscene books in school, it removes the parents' rights. And we must always remember that the child belongs to the parents, and parental rights always need to be protected. I have been in contact with House Rep. Jared Patterson's Chief of Staff, Jeffrey Waldock, and he is working on defining and detailing the language of what exactly they define as obscene books, and I've also requested a list of known vendors that they know sell these types of books so that we can be fully aware of which specific vendors we need to avoid.
I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with aligning with these people, but the language is so vague that I think we need to drill down and get that language a lot tighter.
Having that more clearly defined, moving forward, and having a statement that fits our district, I think would work really well.
That when we do come up with the pledge that we will take, that we also include what our policy is going to be, so it will be very clear and transparent to everybody in the community as well.
Just as Dr. McDonald said, I look forward to a little more. We want to be even more specific than the Patterson pledge. It's a good one, and I like it, I'd sign it, but we just need a little more definition.
Discuss and consider policy and/or procedures regarding HB 547.
So a survey was sent out for UL coaches and directors. That included fine arts, UL academics, everyone at the secondary level that participates in UL activities.
70 people responded to the survey. Of the 70 that responded, 47 were athletic coaches, 10 were fine arts teachers or directors, 9 were UIL academic coaches, and 4 were UIL program directors. 8.6%, or 6 people, voted that they were for this and open to the opportunity of allowing non-enrolled students to participate in extracurricular activities. 17.1%, or 12 people, said they were on the fence. 74.3%, or 52 people, opposed to allow non-enrolled students to participate in extracurricular activities. Will the academic accountability and the academic standards for homeschool students be equal to what the public school student endures on a daily basis? How will the homeschool athlete or student affect the current team culture? Public school students must go through the daily grind of 6 academic classes, an extracurricular class, a quest class, in addition to performing for the club organization, or team before or after school? How does this daily grind compare to what the homeschool student goes through on a daily basis? Teachers, coaches, and instructors take pride in getting their required teaching certification and in the delivery of their classroom instruction. They also take pride in teaching students in their extracurricular activities. They feel that these are equally important and would like to see the same students attend both settings. There are 21 total schools in the state of Texas that currently allow non-enrolled students to participate in extracurricular activities. In the 5A division alone, there are 253 schools. 2 allow non-enrolled students to participate in extracurricular activities. In the 6A classification, which we're headed toward quickly, there are 246 schools in the state of Texas. And again, 2 allow non-enrolled students to participate in extracurricular activities.
But I'm just thinking of ways to be able to implement this that doesn't create a lot of extra work for our coaches.
And I'm glad that we took the time to hear from our teachers and coaches, so thank you guys for doing the extra work on this. So let me begin by saying emphatically that yes, there are many homeschool students who will benefit from participating in UIL activities. I am completely for this.
I would like to ask, last month I had pointed out 30 districts out of 1,080 roughly in the state of Texas have adopted this, House Bill 547. I never asked the question, I failed to, but how was that placed on our agenda, Madam President or Dr. Glenn? Was it brought forward by a fellow trustee, or was it brought forward because we had immense demand from the community to enroll their kids under this House bill?
A trustee asked for it to be placed on the agenda, but I have had parents reach out to me in support of HB 547.
So how many roughly would you say in the community have expressed interest if we move forward with this?
To me directly, the number has been low.
How low, under 10?
Under 10.
Is it practical? Is it something we have so much demand for we need to implement? Dr. Glenn, are our facilities, athletic facilities, I know we've talked about this, are they available to homeschool co-ops and other groups after hours when they're not used by the ISD?
We do have facility use forms that they can fill out to use them, yes. I don't really feel like it's a big decision, but we're giving it a lot of time tonight. We're overanalyzing something that is really not going to be as hard as we're making it out to be. If we have the opportunity to do something good for kids and it's within our power to do it, I wouldn't divert from taking the opportunity.
And I agree with you 100%, Dr. Glenn, but again, it will start out small, but as we grow, that program is going to grow.
Yeah, I would suggest that we actually write the policy. I mean, again, I said this last month, let's write the policy and bring it back so we can have something tangible and approved. I'm for it too, in theory. Let's get the horse before the cart and go write that policy and bring it back for consideration.
One of my heartburns in all of this, having been a UIL coach, we went to these coaches, these teachers that you saw that have spent hours and hours, and we went to them and asked them, what is your desire? And while I've always put kids first, I'm going to tell you that it gives me heartburn to think that we asked and 70 different ones responded and overwhelmingly said no, and that we as a board are going to sit here and say, well, too bad what you said. So that gives me heartburn, because if we don't support those folks when we ask them something, if we're not going to take their recommendation, then we shouldn't ask them.
I didn't hear a resounding no. I heard that we need to do it correctly.
So there's some fear of the unknown that's also in there.
It is something that I ran on when I was running for office, and The community's opinion matters, so I ran on this issue and I was elected, so it's obviously something that our community and voters are wanting, because times are changing. I'll make a motion that we adopt the policy and/or procedures regarding House Bill 547 for homeschool students to participate in UIL activities.
Do I hear a second?
I would just ask what policy is there? There's no policy in the board book to consider at this time.
With the board's approval tonight, we would put together a policy with your approval. And what I'm hearing Mr. Jackson say is if we write the policy, he'll approve the policy. You know, we're going to put the heads in the room and say, hey, write the policy now, because it'll take some time to put together. They'll go through the labor knowing that their labor is not in vain with approval tonight.
I don't want to approve a what if. I mean, I want to see the policy. I want to see every minutia in the policy before I approve it. I've always done that. Any other policy we've had before us, we've never approved carte blanche, go write it.
So what I would say is with Ms. Graff's motion, if you're approving that we are going to have allow homeschool kids to participate next year, and then we'll just bring you policies and let you refine the policies, but we'll go ahead and move forward with homeschool kids participating. Am I hearing you correctly?
But under what guidelines?
Well,
If there's no policy currently written, you're asking us to approve something there's nothing to look at.
I guess what I'm saying is it'll be the responsibility of the administration to bring a suitable policy to the trustees that you approve, but we'll know that ultimately we can start letting homeschool families know that we're just waiting for board approval. You're going to approve the policy. Once you're good with it, the kids will be able to participate. I'm just making sure I hear you correctly.
Well,
you're saying if we vote yes for this tonight, once we have the policy, we have to vote for that too.
No, he's saying we'll approve essentially House Bill 547 to be implemented in Granbury ISD, and we'll write the policy and bring it back to you later.
Well, and we'll keep bringing the policy back until you're happy with it.
Right.
Or what you're saying is write a policy, we may or may not approve it, and we'll just keep going back and forth.
Hey, we have a motion. If there's a second, I'll vote my conscience, but at this point,
Well, we're here to serve the will of the board, so you tell us what you want done.
We have a motion on the floor to accept homeschool students participating in UIL activities. Am I correct?
That was not the motion, Madam President. She read it verbatim off the board book. It was discuss and consider the policy and/or procedures. It wasn't to accept homeschools. If the motion dies, I'll personally make the motion to accept homeschool kids into the district.
Well, if there's no second, the motion dies.
Yeah, or withdraw the motion.
You can withdraw the motion, and then let's let you hear if you would like to second what Mr. Jackson said. So go ahead and
I'll go ahead and withdraw my motion.
Thank you.
Madam President, I'll move that we construct a policy to allow homeschool kids per House Bill 547 to participate in UIL activities in Granbury ISD, subject to final approval by the board.
And I will second that motion.
Wonderful. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? Okay, we have 5 for, 2 against. Removing EF local and adopting EFA A local and EFB local drafted by TASB per TEA model policies with the slight modification that I put in as well.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam President. So in Update 119, TASB Policy Service offered a split policy option for GISD. And so their recommendation is that we remove our current policy, EF local, and they split it into EFA that addresses the selection and review of instructional materials, and EFB that addresses the selection and review of library materials. And so both of those new policies are in front of you. And so it is recommended that the board approve the removal of EF local in its entirety and replace it with the EFA local for instructional materials and EFB local for library materials so that we can properly address selection and review of all materials in our libraries and in our schools as presented.
Any comments or questions from the board? Do I have a motion?
Madam President, I move that we accept remove the EF local in its entirety and replace it with both the EFA local for instructional materials and the EFB local for library materials as presented.
And do I have a second on that?
I second that motion.
Okay. The motion was made by Ms. Gore. It was seconded by Dr. Harrington. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Madam President, maybe we have discussion now that the motion's on the table.
Go right ahead.
Actually, I'd just like to make a comment. We've heard over the last several months, several speakers on the topic of books in our libraries. It has covered the spectrum from left to right, right to left. It's been a difficult position for the board members, as some of you have acknowledged. I just ask for a little patience and a little grace at this point. Those who know me and some of the others around this board table know what kind of people we are and how long some of us have served on this board and served this community and always had the kids central to every decision we've made. Give us a little bit of benefit of the doubt. We're under tremendous pressure. And you have to realize, I'll just tell you quickly, about 10 years ago, unbeknownst to most of you in this room, the ACLU sent some communication to the district. Basically, they were about to sue us because we opened our meetings with prayer. Now, I've been the board president of 2 stints during that time and since, and we still open our meetings with prayer. So if you want to question my heart and my spirit, you can. I just ask, give us some grace. Be patient. We're trying to bring, with this policy, order to this chaos, order to this process, because folks, like it or not, we're in the public sector, and things just take a hell of a lot longer than any of us like. But have a little faith and have a little trust. We're called trustees for a reason, because we're entrusted with your most valuable resource, our most valuable resource, our kids, our very future. So, as someone famously cast stones at the board as we went through the pandemic, I ask you now, hold that stone in your hand and maybe just drop it on the ground and give us a little more time, because you know what? We're going to do the right thing. You may not all agree with it, and we may not all agree as a corporate body up here, but I can assure you, I've had 4 kids go through the school system, one still in the high school. I would never expose them to anything vulgar, vile, pornographic, as some of you have said. But I will tell you, I am angry because of the misinformation I'm hearing on both sides of the spectrum, left and right. On the right, in fact, the last speaker pointed out a book called The Lawn Boy. It's in your libraries. It's ugly. Here's an excerpt from it. Guess what? She didn't bother to check the author of the year that book was published. It was a totally different book. The book we have was totally benign. Another example from that same person is a curriculum that apparently we had over 100 books on. That curriculum hadn't been touched in 10 years. Those books have been collecting dust. So with this policy we're about to enact, please watch. Please be engaged. Stay plugged in. Look at the policy closely. We are tightening it down. We're going to put up the fences to make sure some of these books don't enter our libraries again. And it may take time to ferret out the ones that are distasteful, because I have many friends on the left, by the way, two of which, of the three that wrote that open letter to this board, I have served with. I know those men's hearts. I think they're really pretty good men. I consider them friends when we served on the board together. So guys, we're neighbors here. And for those of us who call ourselves Christians, you know the ultimate lesson. Treat those like you want to be treated. So show a little love and grace to your neighbors. Thank you.
Madam President, he addressed us. May we respond?
I did not address you, Mr. Lowry. I did not. I said the last speaker, I mentioned no name.
Ladies, Madam President, he has personally addressed us.
No, sir, we can't go into
You're talking about the plan, the one you're talking about approving is talking about one employee. And I don't know what books he's reading, but the ones that we've presented is talking about bestiality, it's about pornography, it's about rape.
Sir, you had your time to talk. I understand what you're saying.
Transparency, he just addressed us in pretty.
Madam President, I call the meeting back to order, and Mr. Lowry, you have an opportunity to come back and address that next week, but in fact, by Robert's Rules of Order, you're out of order, and so we'll note that and invite you back. And in doing that, I would like to say, I agree.
Sir, again, I didn't mention your name. No, sir. And here's the Christian love I'm pointing to. I never mentioned your name. I never personally attacked you. I stated misstatements of fact that I know you won't disagree with, because it was misstatement of fact. And all I asked was for a little grace, sir. It was no personal attack, but you're making it that way.
Madam President, I call point of order again.
I have a motion and a second on the floor.
Indicated that there was misinformation. You referenced one book, sir. You're not addressing the entirety of this program.
I call a point of order.
Like I said, sir, it's a time-consuming process, unfortunately, but we're working
Point of
on it.
order again, Madam President. I call a point of order again.
You got a motion and a second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. How many are in favor? How many are opposed? Passes 7-0.